Welcome back to our channel, where we uncover the most gripping true crime stories from around the world. Today, we're diving into the heartbreaking story of Sylvia Marie Likens, born on January 3rd, 1949, to Betty and Lester Likens, was the middle child in a family with two sets of paternal twins. Her older siblings were Diana and Danny, and her younger siblings were Jenny and Benny. Despite the children's efforts to help, the family struggled financially due to scarce job opportunities. When Diana was old enough, she got married, had a child, and moved out to start her own family. The boys stayed behind to assist at home and help their father take care of the girls. In the summer of 1965, Betty and Lester took jobs at a carnival, which required them to leave town. It was crucial for Sylvia and Jenny to remain in school, so they needed someone to look after the girls. They chose Gertrude Baniszewski. Gertrude's life was also difficult. She was born in 1929 as the third of 6 children in a very poor family. She dropped out of high school at 16 and married John, who was 2 years older than her, and together they had 6 children. John, her husband, is extremely abusive, so she escapes and marries Dennis, with whom she has 1 child. In total, she has 7 children and 6 miscarriages. Unfortunately, Dennis is just as abusive as John, and eventually he decides he no longer wants to be a husband or father, abandoning the family. That is the last mention of him. In the summer of 1965, Lester asks Gertrude to watch his daughters while he travels with the carnival. Initially, she refuses because Jenny has polio and is permanently disabled, viewing it as a burden. However, when Lester offers her $20 a week, equivalent to almost $165 today, she cannot refuse due to her need for money, so she agrees, and the girls move in. Things deteriorate rapidly. Within the first weeks, they are being starved, receiving only a piece of toast in the morning, nothing for lunch, and a small bowl of soup for dinner. When the check doesn't arrive on time, Gertrude becomes convinced that Sylvia and Jenny's father won't send the money and beats the girls as punishment. Although the check arrives the next day, Gertrude's attitude doesn't change. She particularly despises Sylvia. Jenny, who has polio and is completely disabled, can't defend herself and can only watch. Eventually, Gertrude's hand gets tired from beating Sylvia, so she switches to using a metal board, which leaves scars all over Sylvia's back. The abuse escalates, and it isn't just Gertrude inflicting it anymore. Her children and neighbourhood kids join in, with Gertrude even charging 5 cents for neighbourhood kids to come into the basement and beat Sylvia. At one point, Sylvia confesses to having a boyfriend. Before living in Gertrude's house, Sylvia had stayed in Venice, which angered Gertrude. She accused Sylvia of being a prostitute and being pregnant, then repeatedly kicked her in the crotch. Around this time, Gertrude's children started pushing Sylvia down the stairs, which made Gertrude laugh, so they continued to do it to please her. Gertrude encouraged her kids to do whatever they wanted to Sylvia, using her as a punching bag, putting out cigarettes on her and cutting her. It was essentially a free-for-all. Gertrude's oldest daughter, Paula, broke her hand while beating Sylvia. After getting a cast, Paula used it to continue beating Sylvia. Sometimes they forced Jenny to hit and punch her sister, threatening her with the same fate if she refused, which she eventually did out of fear. They decided Sylvia was no longer fit to live among people and stripped her naked, throwing her into the basement indefinitely. She was barely fed, severely beaten, and frequently lost control of her bladder and bowels. When she defecated in the basement, they forced her to clean it by eating her feces. After one incident of urination, Gertrude deemed her dirty and needing a bath. They filled a clawfoot bathtub upstairs with boiling hot water, bound Sylvia's wrists and ankles, and immersed her in the scalding water, leaving her with burns and blisters all over her body in addition to the cuts and burns from cigarettes. Gertrude would rub salt into her wounds, a torture that occurred unpredictably, sometimes once a day and sometimes several times a day, with no consistent pattern. Gertrude would drag Sylvia upstairs, starving and naked, and force her to strip dance for her children. When Sylvia struggled, she was viciously beaten. What is particularly upsetting is the number of missed opportunities to save Sylvia. Jenny wrote a letter to their older sister Diana detailing the abuse at the Baniszewski house. Not only did Diana do nothing, but she also called Jenny a liar. There are reports of Diana visiting the house later and being shooed away by Gertrude, but mostly, Diana dismissed Jenny's claims as lies. A neighbour boy witnessed some of the abuse in the basement and told his parents that Sylvia was being hit and kicked. His parents dismissed it, saying that's just how punishment works sometimes. A couple who moved in next door saw the abuse on 2 separate occasions, once at a backyard barbecue when Paula threw hot water in Sylvia's face, and another time when the wife saw Sylvia with bruises and blisters. When she asked about it, Gertrude admitted to causing the injuries and then beat Sylvia with a belt. The neighbour did nothing. Multiple people heard screams from the basement but did nothing. At one point, school nurses visited the house to check on Sylvia since she hadn't been to school in weeks. Gertrude told them Sylvia had run away, and no further investigation was conducted. The neglect was so severe that after Sylvia's death, the examiner noted she was so dehydrated she couldn't even form tears. Could you imagine being beaten and abused so bad that you can't even cry from the heartbreaking? More than one occasion, Gertrude forced Sylvia to masturbate with a Coke bottle. The damage was so bad to her genitals that doctors said her vaginal canal was swollen, almost completely shut. They told a story of one time forcing her to eat the contents of a baby diaper, or of shoveling so much condiments and spices and stuff from the kitchen onto a hot dog in force feeding Sylvia that she threw up, and once she threw up, they forced her to eat the throw up. One night, for whatever reason, Gertrude said Jenny could sleep with Sylvia in the basement while down there. Sylvia asked Jenny for a glass of water. Jenny got it for her, and unfortunately, Sylvia peed the bed. In the morning, Gertrude accused her of being a prostitute and started to carve a prostitute, and I'm proud into Sylvia's abdomen. Halfway through, she got tired and couldn't finish, so she had the children finish carving the words into her stomach, and they did. Around this time, they notice that Sylvia is struggling to form coherent sentences. Her body is covered in infected blisters, cuts and wounds, and she is severely dehydrated and malnourished. Gertrude believes Sylvia is close to death and begins devising a cover story. She dictates a letter for Sylvia to write, claiming she ran away with some boys who intended to abandon her in the woods to die. Sylvia overhears this plan and attempts to escape, signalling a turning point. Her first escape attempt occurs on October 25th when she is caught trying to flee the house. Strangely, Gertrude tries to force feed her a piece of toast, but Sylvia is too weak to eat it. Angered, Gertrude shoves the toast into Sylvia's mouth and beats her in the mouth with a metal rod. She hits her so hard with this metal rod, the metal rod is bunted in all angles. She finished beating her, and then at the last minute, one of the neighbour boys, Hubbard, picks the rod back up and hits her one final time in the face, knocking her unconscious, and then they drag her into the basement and leave her there. At some point in the night, Sylvia wakes up, and she knows that she's going to die, and she starts screaming for help and banging on the walls. The neighbours heard her and decided not to call the cops. In October 26th, she tries for the final time to escape the house. She's delirious, she's got brain damage, she's on the edge of death, and Gertrude stomps on her head, causes a brain hemorrhage. After Sylvia's death, Gertrude instructs the boys to go to a payphone and call the police, telling them Sylvia ran away. When the police arrive, Gertrude admits Sylvia ran away with some boys, but claims she must have been brought back and killed in the basement. However, Jenny whispers to the cops before they leave, promising to reveal everything if they get her out of there. The police take Jenny, and she confesses everything. Gertrude, her 2 children, John and Paula, and 2 neighbourhood boys, Coy Hubbard and Richard Hobbs, are put on trial, prosecuted, and found guilty. Once again, the failure of society to protect this young girl is evident. Gertrude spends 18 years in jail before being released in 1985, where she lives freely until her death in 1990. However, her death is of little consequence compared to the justice that should have been served in jail. The children served only 18 months and were given new identities upon release to start afresh. However, the weight of their actions caught up with at least one of them, as he later succumbed to lung cancer. Paula, despite her heinous acts, became a schoolteacher in Iowa, only to be fired when her past actions were revealed. It's heartbreaking to think that the woman who once broke her hand torturing and mutilating a young girl was entrusted with teaching children the same age as Sylvia. This is the tragic story of Sylvia. Additionally, the Q Crime channel offers numerous other captivating cases for you to explore. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated with Q Crime Story videos every day. Farewell for now, and we eagerly anticipate your presence in our future videos.